One of the foremost impacts made by the Arya Samaj movement in northern India was through education. The Arya Samaj sought to build up its educational institutions, both DAV College and Gurukul Kangri, and other institutions and activities through self-help and self-reliance. The DAV College of Lahore was established by the people, with the money of the people, for the people, as noted by Lala Lajpat Rai. The founders of the DAV College refused to take government grants and thus refused to be tied down by government shackles in the form of grants or by conducting the examinations under the aegis of the Punjab University. In the words of Lala Lajpat Rai, the principle, which also is a sort of unwritten law, imposes on the managers a sort of moral obligation not to seek monetary assistance of any kind from the government. This principle has also been so far acted upon, unless a petty grant of a few thousand rupees made by the university be considered as an exception. Another notable point was that the teaching was done exclusively by Indians. The college taught Sanskrit, Hindi, English, Persian, philosophy, both Eastern and modern history, political economy, logic, elementary physics, chemistry, elementary botany, elementary biology, and higher mathematics, all taught by Indian teachers. The MA classes were given in Sanskrit by Indian teachers, unaided by any foreign agency. The students were also given training in manual skills and handicraft and imparted education in science and technology. The DAV College also aimed at giving free education. Though paucity of funds and government and university regulations rendered this principle ineffective, yet the fees at the college was generally 50% less than those in force in government schools and colleges. The institutions run by the Gurukul party remained completely immune from government interference from their very inception. Both of these educational institutions of the Arya Samaj were experiments in purely indigenous enterprise, which helped in developing a spirit of self-help, self-confidence, and self-reliance in a community which had lost these in due course of time as a result of prevailing circumstances and want of opportunities under the colonial rule. Said Lala Lajpat Rai, "It is true we have popularized university education and turned out hundreds of graduates and thousands of other scholars, so much so that there is hardly any department of public and private activity in Upper India in which old DAVs are not to be found doing their part creditably and honorably." Among those who studied at the DAVs and the Gurukuls were found eminent public personnel, some venturing in the literary and journalistic fields, others into pioneering trades and industries, while some holding high appointments under the government. Through these institutions, a great impetus was given to the study of Hindi and Sanskrit, which, along with developing a spirit of self-help and self-confidence among the Hindus, also created a spirit of Hindu consciousness, which manifested itself in various forms and varying degrees. The aspect of women's education was most interesting. It was the Gurukul party and not the college party which was in favor of women's education when the idea was mooted in late 1880s and early 1890s. It is ironical that the supposedly more orthodox wing supported higher education for women, while the supposedly more progressive wing opposed it, as noted by Madhu Kishwar. The idea of expanding the existing primary school for girls in Jalandhar had sparked off a debate throughout 1894 between the two wings of the Arya Samaj, the Mahatma or Gurukul wing, supposed to be more orthodox, to which Lala Devraj and Munshi Ram belonged, and the college wing, supposed to be more progressive, which was responsible for the founding of Dayanand Anglo-Vedic schools and colleges for men. Also, it may be true that women's education under the aegis of the Arya Samaj in late 19th century and first half of the 20th century was aimed at reforming women rather than reforming the social conditions that oppressed them, in the words of a scholar, or that the education that the Samaj provided to women sought to create ideal householders or grahasthans out of women. Yet, women who did receive such an education were able to come out of their households and express their sense of freedom in a way that was never done before. Some of them went on to become educationists, social activists, and even small-time politicians. Acharya Savitri Devi and Kumari Lajjavati are apt examples of this. While the others who did not venture out into the public space remained educated and therefore worthy partners of their modern educated husbands. Besides, the education propagated by the Arya Samaj promoted the use of Hindi as the lingua franca of the nation. By advocating the official use of Hindi instead of Urdu, some members of the Arya Samaj were, however, embroiled in the Hindi-Urdu controversy, beginning with the last few decades of the 19th century. While many members of the Arya Samaj became exponents of the official use of Hindi, we have several poets as well as writers writing in the Hindi language also being impacted by the principles of the Samaj, such as the ideals of denunciation of idolatry, advocacy of the spirit of social service, and so on. The spirit of self-reliance and self-pride propagated by the founders of the Samaj led to the consolidation of a certain kind of identity which manifested itself in several forms. The Arya Samaj undoubtedly played a significant role in bringing about the transformation of people's attitudes towards themselves and towards foreign rule. As a result, people learned to take pride in their intellectual and spiritual achievements. Though its distinctiveness lay in basing all reforms on Vedic scriptures, it also demanded social reforms and was successful through legislations such as the Child Marriage Restraint Act of 1929, an act to restrain the solemnization of child marriage, prohibiting the marriage of girls below the age of 14 and boys below the age of 16. The Arya Marriage Validity Act of 1937, an act to recognize and remove doubts as to the validity of intercaste marriage current among Arya Samajists, and the Naik Girls Protection Act of 1928, notes Indra Vidyavachaspati. Because the Arya Samaj was a democratic body with minimum requirements for membership eligibility, and it allowed for varied interpretation of the Satyat Prakash, the book which embodied all the principles of the Samaj, it offered its members the leeway to adopt and take forward varied ideological strains. While some members took to the reformist ideals of the Samaj, the others became involved with the confrontational aspects of it, often giving way to communal politics. One of the ways in which the Arya Samaj asserted itself was the Shuddhi or the purification movement. Swami Shraddhanand and other prominent leaders of the Samaj exhibited a great zeal to restore caste status to the low caste groups who had converted to other religions, and thus to bring them back to the Hindu fold. Because, as in the words of Lala Lajpat Rai, the context for the emergence of the Shuddhi movement was partly political, partly communal, and partly humanitarian. The impact of the Shuddhi movement was also quite varied. While, on one hand, the Arya Samaj claimed to bring about a certain degree of social relief to the lower castes, for instance, by making the villagers agree to allow the former to draw water from a public well in the Gurdaspur district of Punjab. On the other hand, the Arya Samaji leaders of the Shuddhi movement had to ally with upper caste groups for the same. For example, for the reclamation of the Malkana Rajputs, many orthodox factions such as the Bharat Dharma Mahamandal, the Sadhu Mahasabha, the Gujar Mahasabha, the Jat Mahasabha and the Rajput Bhratri Sammelan joined hands with the Arya Samaj. The Shuddhi movement was not only about reclamation of the depressed classes, but it was also an expression of the Arya Samaj's cry against social inequalities and for encouraging egalitarianism by interdining with members of the lower castes and by attempting to admit them to higher ritual status. The Arya Samajis tried to reclaim the depressed classes by admitting them to the privileges of the Dvijas, meaning those who were born in God or twice born. They administered Gayatri to a select number, invested them with the sacred thread, conferred on them the privilege of performing the Homa, and started interdining and, a few cases, even performing intermarriage with them. The Samaj established organizations such as the Dayanand Dalit Udhar Mandal at Hoshiarpur and the Megh Udhar Sabha at Sialkot, with the specific aim to socially uplift the lower castes. However, the act of reclaiming the lower castes converted to other religions brought the Arya Samajis in direct confrontation with the other religious communities, especially the Muslims. This gave way to bitter conflicts between certain members of the Samaj and those of the other communities. Apart from making efforts to socially emancipate the depressed classes through the Shuddhi movement, the Samaj endeavored to carry out many other endeavors in self-help and self-reliance. The college faction of the Arya Samaj, along with others, was instrumental in establishing the Punjab National Bank, which has the distinction of becoming the first Indian bank to have been started solely with Indian capital, and that has survived to the present. The Arya Samajis did not apply the principle of self-help in education only, but in enterprise as well. As Lala Lajpat Rai has written in his autobiography, Lala Mool Raj, prominent Arya Samaji, was one of the key founders of the Punjab National Bank, had long cherished the idea of Indians having a national bank of their own. He had keenly felt that Indian capital was being used to run English banks and companies, the profits accruing from which went entirely to the British, while the Indians had to content themselves with a small interest on their capital. Another area of active involvement of the Arya Samaj was in philanthropic work, such as providing relief to those affected by floods and famines. It organized relief shelters, orphanages and widow homes for the destitute, all with the help of private charity. By the beginning of the 20th century, many orphanages run by the Arya Samaj had sprung up all over North India. The orphan relief movement of the Arya Samaj had enabled the Arya Samajis to organize, fund and execute relief operations on a growing scale and with increased efficiency. Even though other elements of the Hindu community, including the Sanatanists and the Sikhs, participated, the leadership and manpower rested heavily with the college faction of the Arya Samaj, mainly with Lala Lajpat Rai. Fear of Christian missionary successes through conversion during famine periods drove them to sustain and, wherever possible, extend their orphanage systems and associated relief work. In 1901, Lala Lajpat Rai helped persuade the Famine Commission to accept the principles that children should not be made over to persons or institutions of different religions until all efforts to find persons or institutions of their own religion willing to take charge of them have failed. This principle was reaffirmed by the courts in 1904. The spirit of nationalism inspired many members of the Arya Samaj. An entire chapter devoted to the science of government in the Satyat Prakash, which was critical of foreign rule and pointed towards self-government, made an impact on the minds of several members of the body. As a result, the British government had become suspicious of the Samaj as a seditious body, especially in the first decade of the 20th century. Swami Dayanand Saraswati's emphasis on the use of Swadeshi goods was carried forward by his followers after his death. The opening up of the Swadeshi Vastu Pracharani Sabha and later the Punjab Swadeshi Association with the objective of pledging to use Swadeshi goods, spreading knowledge about the advantages of using Indian articles. In short, popularizing the use of Swadeshi goods indicates that Swadeshi remained one of the major concerns of the Arya Samaj. Active involvement of the Arya Samaj throughout the Punjab and the United Provinces also alludes to the fact that many Arya Samajis were drawn towards nationalism as the political goal of the times. One of the greatest contributions of the Arya Samaj to the Hindu society was to impart a spirit of self-respect and self-confidence given the context of imperial subjugation. By referring to the past glory of Hinduism and a plea to establish the same in the current context, it was able to arouse the consciousness of the people and instill in them a spirit of nationalism. It gave the people a commonality of language and script and a goal, though termed obscure by many, to reform the present society, taking inspiration from the Vedic past. The founding in 1927 of the Arya Veer Dal, an army of volunteers to protect the religious and social rights of the Arya Samaj, and agitations launched by it in Hyderabad in 1939 and in Sindh in 1946 speak of the intensity in its efforts to protect the community and the principles it espoused. Concomitantly, it taught that self-government is better than foreign government, however good, and also stressed on Swadharma, that is one's own religion, Swaraj, one's own government, Swadeshi, one's own country, and Swabhasha, one's own language. The Arya Samaj was confined mainly to northern India, concentrated in the Punjab and spreading over into United Provinces, Kashmir, Bihar, Orissa and Rajasthan. That is, where a peripheral social base to Hinduism existed. Patronized by landed aristocracy, well-to-do merchants and Hindu rulers of erstwhile principalities of Rajputana, the Arya Samaj was a movement of middle-class Hindus who received European education and were drawn mainly from the higher castes, but who took the movement to the lower castes as an opportunity for rising socially without abandoning Hinduism, as noted by Gauri Shankar Bhatt. A phenomenal increase in the number of Jats of United Provinces in the ranks of the Arya Samaj in a period of 20 years, from 1911 to 1931, as seen in the census of India of 1921 and 1931, showed that the movement was making strong appeal to those who, though better off economically, had been denied a higher social status in the hierarchy of the Hindu social system. I have till now endeavored to explore the social and political impact of the Arya Samaj movement in northern India. The Arya Samaj continues to make an impact on the social, cultural and religious milieu of Indian society. In the last few decades, under the aegis of Swami Agnivesh, late president of the World Council of Arya Samaj, Sarvadeshik Arya Pratinidhi Sabha, the Arya Samaj has been very active in the arena of social reform. Among some of the activities of the Samaj, especially its apex body, the Sarvadeshik Arya Pratinidhi Sabha has been the 285 kilometers anti-Sati march from Delhi to Deorala, Rajasthan, beginning in early December 1987 to campaign against Sati, dowry, child marriage and the persecution of widows. The Indian Parliament responded by enacting a Sati Prevention Act in 1987. Its social forum called the Bandhua Mukti Morcha or Bonded Labour Liberation Front has vehemently opposed child labour. Formed in 1981 to wage a battle against the pernicious bonded labour system in India, it achieved the release of over 1,24,000 bonded Indians from the shackles of slavery. A large number of them have been rehabilitated. From the carpet industry alone, about 1,000 children have been rescued and restored to their parents. The BMM also started a campaign for the provision of non-formal, full-time education for these children, along with the supply of nutrition to each and also some food security to their poor families. Viewing these aspects of the Samaj, one can safely say that the Arya Samaj, with its radical, revivalist and at the same time modernist ideology, guided its members to perform various functions of life and left an indelible mark on the society of North India. It also travelled to other parts of the country and also to Fiji, Mauritius, East and South Africa. Apart from that, one must also keep in mind that given the hostility of the British government in India to higher education of the masses and their minimal efforts at relief during the time of crisis, the Arya Samaj represented the Indian hands that came together for the upliftment of their own people. The spirit of self-help and self-reliance in North India was thus generated by the Arya Samaj. Thank you.